At my 30th birthday dinner, surrounded by friends and family, my girlfriend raised her glass and called me just a phase she was growing out of. Everyone laughed while I sat there in shock. I didn't argue. I didn't beg. I quietly made one decision that night. By morning, her access to my money, my company, and my life was gone. Months later, she watched online as I married the woman she had spent years trying to compete with. The Venetian room at the Grand Lafayette Hotel costs $12,000 for a Saturday evening in November. I know this because I wrote the check myself, transferring funds from my business account with the quiet satisfaction of a man who has finally, after years of struggle and sacrifice, arrived at a place where such extravagance is not merely possible, but justified. My 30th birthday, 3 decades on this earth, and I wanted to mark the occasion with something memorable, something that would reflect not just where I was, but how far I had come. I had started my company at 24, in a cramped studio apartment with a laptop and a credit card and a conviction that I could build something from nothing. My parents thought I was reckless. My friends thought I was delusional. My girlfriend at the time, not Chloe, a different woman, one whose name I no longer allow myself to dwell on, told me I needed to get a real job and left 6 months later. I didn't blame her. I was working 18-hour days, surviving on ramen and coffee, subsisting on the thin oxygen of entrepreneurial ambition. It was not a life most people would choose. But I chose it. Every day I chose it. And eventually, my choices began to bear fruit. By year 3, I had 10 employees and a profitable SaaS platform. By year 5, I had 50 employees and a valuation that made my mother cry when I told her. By year 7, I had 200 employees, offices in 3 cities, and more money than I had ever imagined possible. I was not a billionaire, not even close. But I was successful by any reasonable measure, and more importantly, I was content. Then I met Chloe. She came to my company as a marketing consultant, hired by my COO, to revamp our brand strategy. I was in the conference room when she delivered her initial presentation, and I was struck not by her beauty, though she was objectively beautiful, with sharp cheekbones and perfect hair, and the kind of effortless elegance that money can't buy, but by her confidence. She spoke with absolute certainty, her slides crisp and her arguments airtight. She dismantled our existing approach with surgical precision and proposed a new direction so compelling that I approved the budget on the spot. After the meeting, she approached me. "Edward, right? The founder?" "Yes." I shook her hand, conscious of my own relative informality. I was wearing jeans, a blazer, the uniform of a tech entrepreneur who no longer needed to impress anyone. "I've read your case study in Forbes. The Series B round, the international expansion." Her smile was warm, almost admiring. "Impressive work." "Thank you. I have a confession." She leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. "I actually took this contract specifically because I wanted to work with you. Your company is doing innovative things, and I've been looking for an opportunity to pivot from consulting to in-house leadership." A pause, perfectly timed. I was hoping we could discuss that possibility over dinner. I should have been suspicious. I should have recognized the calculated nature of her approach, the careful choreography of ambition dressed as admiration. But I was 37 months out of a devastating breakup, lonely in ways I didn't fully acknowledge, and flattered that this brilliant, beautiful woman had chosen me. We had dinner, then another dinner, then a weekend away. Within 3 months, Chloe had moved into my apartment, and I had created a new position for her at my company, Vice President of Marketing and Brand Strategy. It was a title that impressed her friends, a salary that dwarfed her consulting income, and a concentration of power that I would later recognize as the first thread in a noose. But in the beginning, it was wonderful. Or at least, it seemed wonderful. Chloe was attentive and affectionate, planning elaborate dates and surprising me with thoughtful gifts. She took an interest in my work, offering strategic advice and connecting me with her extensive network. She was ambitious, driven, relentlessly focused on success, qualities I admired because they mirrored my own. I told myself we were a power couple, partners in both life and business. I told myself I had finally found someone who understood me. I told myself a lot of things. The cracks began to appear around the 1-year mark. Small things at first. Dismissive comments about my taste in art, my choice of friends, my reluctance to upgrade to a penthouse apartment. Chloe had opinions about everything, and those opinions were always superior to mine. She didn't argue. She simply corrected, with the patient condescension of a tutor addressing a slow student. I told myself she was just being helpful. I told myself I was being sensitive. Then the financial integration began. It started with small requests. Could I cover her credit card bill this month? She had unexpected expenses, a cash flow issue. It would only be this once. I said yes because I loved her and because the amount was trivial to me. A few $1,000s. What did it matter? But it wasn't just once. It was every month. And the amounts grew. 5,000, 10,000, 20,000. Chloe's lifestyle was expensive. Designer clothes, luxury vacations, regular spa treatments. And her salary, though substantial, was not sufficient to sustain it. She never explicitly asked me to fund her habits. She simply presented her needs as emergencies, her desires as necessities, and I paid because it was easier than confronting the underlying dynamic. I also paid because I believed, deep down, that this was what love looked like. My parents had modeled a marriage of mutual sacrifice, my father working overtime to support my mother's art career, my mother postponing her dreams to raise children. I had internalized the lesson that love meant giving, and giving meant money, and money meant nothing compared to the happiness of the person you cherished. But Chloe was not my mother, and her happiness was a bottomless well. The more I gave, the more she expected. The more I sacrificed, the less she appreciated. By the second year of our relationship, I was supporting her completely. Her apartment, her car, her wardrobe, her vacations, her family's emergencies, her friends' weddings. She had stopped using her own credit cards. She had stopped contributing to our shared expenses. She had, without my conscious awareness, become entirely dependent on my income, while simultaneously treating me with the casual contempt of someone who believes their provider is also their inferior. I didn't see it. Or rather, I saw it and refused to believe it. I loved Chloe, or at least I loved the idea of her, the brilliant, ambitious woman who had chosen me, who validated my success, who made me feel less alone. I convinced myself that her demands were reasonable, her criticisms constructive, her distance temporary. I convinced myself that if I just gave a little more, tried a little harder, became the man she wanted me to be, everything would finally be okay. It was, of course, a fantasy. And like all fantasies, it was shattered by reality. The Venetian room was decorated in shades of gold and cream, crystal chandeliers casting prismatic light across white linen tablecloths. I had invited 60 people, colleagues, clients, friends from various stages of my life. My parents flew in from Ohio, my sister from Chicago. My COO, Marcus, had helped organize the event, and I had insisted on paying for everything myself, rejecting his suggestion that the company should contribute. This is personal, I told him. My 30th. I want to own it. He had looked at me with something like concern. And Chloe? She's helping with the arrangements? Chloe is handling the guest experience, I said, parroting her own description of her role. She has excellent taste. Marcus didn't argue. He rarely did when it came to Chloe. None of my friends or colleagues did. They had learned, as I had, that questioning Chloe's influence was an exercise in futility. She was too entrenched, too powerful, too essential to my happiness and my company's operations. Challenging her meant challenging me, and no one wanted to be responsible for destabilizing the founder. So they watched, and they waited, and they said nothing. The evening began beautifully. Cocktails and canapes in the reception area, the string quartet playing something appropriately elegant, my mother crying when she saw the floral arrangements. Chloe circulated among the guests with the practiced grace of a hostess, touching arms and exchanging air kisses, her black gown catching the light with each calculated movement. She was in her element, performing the role of the founder's partner with professional polish. I watched her from across the room, a glass of champagne warming in my hand, and I felt something I couldn't quite identify. Not pride exactly, not satisfaction, perhaps the faintest whisper of unease, quickly suppressed. Dinner was served at 8, filet mignon with truffle sauce, roasted vegetables, a wine pairing selected by Chloe's personal sommelier. I sat at the head of the table, my parents on one side, Chloe on the other. Speeches were delivered, my father's tearful tribute, Marcus's dry humor, my sister's embarrassing childhood anecdotes. I laughed and blushed and accepted the affectionate roasting, buoyed by the warmth of so many people who genuinely cared about me. Then it was time for the toast. Chloe rose from her seat, champagne flute in hand, and the room quieted in anticipation. She was, after all, my girlfriend of 2 years, the woman everyone assumed would eventually become my wife. Her speech would be the emotional centerpiece of the evening, the public declaration of our partnership and shared future. "Edward," she began, turning to face me. Her smile was wide, her posture confident. "When I met you 2 years ago, I wasn't sure what to expect. You were this tech guy, this entrepreneur, this person who had built an empire from nothing. I thought, here is someone I can learn from, someone who can help me grow." I smiled back, waiting for the praise to continue. "And you have helped me grow. You've given me opportunities, connections, experiences I never would have had otherwise. You've been useful." A pause, perfectly timed. The room was silent, uncertain. But I think we all know that growth means change. Evolution. Sometimes outgrowing the environments that nurtured us. My smile began to falter. Chloe raised her glass higher, addressing the room now. "Edward is a wonderful man. Kind, generous, successful. He will make someone very happy someday. But I've realized, as I've advanced in my own career and my own life, that our relationship is not sustainable. Not in the long term." She turned back to me, her expression almost pitying. "He's not my future. He's a phase I'm growing out of." Laughter, scattered at first, uncertain, then spreading as people processed her words as a joke. Because it had to be a joke, right? A cruel toast at her boyfriend's 30th birthday party? No one could be that deliberately, publicly vicious. She must be teasing, subverting expectations, building toward a heartfelt declaration of love. But Chloe didn't continue. She simply sipped her champagne and sat down, her smile serene, her duty discharged. The silence stretched. My mother's face was pale. My father's jaw was tight. Marcus was staring at Chloe with an expression I had never seen on his face before, cold, assessing, the look of a man calculating damages and potential responses. And I sat at the head of the table, 30 candles flickering in front of me, and felt the foundations of my carefully constructed life begin to crumble. I didn't react. I didn't scream, didn't cry, didn't demand an explanation. Something inside me had frozen solid, a glacier of self-preservation that would not allow this woman to see me shatter. Instead, I leaned forward, took a deep breath, and blew out the candles. 30 flames extinguished. 30 years ended. The applause was hesitant, confused. The waitstaff, blessedly professional, began distributing the birthday cake. Conversation resumed in fragments. People unsure whether to acknowledge what had just occurred. Chloe was chatting with someone to her left, apparently unconcerned. I sat motionless, the taste of smoke on my tongue, and made a silent wish. I wished for the strength to leave her. I wished for the clarity to see myself as I truly was, not as she had convinced me to believe. I wished for a future that did not include her face at my table, her voice in my ear, her hand in my wallet. I wished to outgrow the phase of my life that she represented, to evolve into someone who would never again tolerate being treated as disposable. I wished, and I waited, and I planned. The party continued. I made conversation, accepted congratulations, posed for photographs. I smiled and nodded and performed the role of the gracious birthday boy while my mind raced through calculations, contingencies, escape routes. Chloe, satisfied that she had made her point, relaxed into the evening, drinking champagne and accepting compliments on her dress. She had no idea what was coming. The next morning, I woke at 5 a.m., before dawn, before Chloe stirred in the guest room where she had slept. Separate bedrooms had become standard, another accommodation I had made without acknowledging its significance. I dressed quietly, made coffee, and sat at my home office desk with a legal pad and a pen. I began to list every financial account I shared with Chloe, every credit card she held in my name, every recurring payment, automatic transfer, authorized user designation, every lease, subscription, membership, and service tied to her access to my money. I listed them all, line by line, in neat, precise handwriting. Then I began to cancel. It took 4 hours. I called banks and credit card companies, changed passwords and PINs, revoked authorizations, and closed accounts. I contacted my property manager to remove her from the lease. I contacted my auto insurance provider to remove her from my policy. I contacted my accountant, my lawyer, my financial advisor, instructing them to sever every legal and financial tie between Chloe Chun and Edward Morrison. When I finished, I had a stack of confirmation numbers and a profound, unfamiliar sense of clarity. For 2 years, I had been bleeding resources into a relationship that provided nothing but the illusion of connection. For 2 years, I had subsidized a lifestyle and received contempt in return. For 2 years, I had been the fool in a one-sided transaction. No longer. Chloe emerged around 10 a.m., wrapped in one of my bathrobes, her expression still drowsy. "You're up early. Work." I didn't look up from my laptop. She drifted into the kitchen, poured herself coffee, scrolled through her phone. Then, "Edward, my credit card was declined at the coffee shop yesterday. Did you forget to pay the bill?" "No." A pause. "What does that mean?" I closed my laptop and turned to face her. "It means I canceled the card, along with all the others. Your name has been removed from my accounts, your access revoked from my properties, your authorization terminated from every financial instrument that was issued in my name and used for your benefit." She stared at me, her coffee forgotten. "You're joking." "I have never been more serious. This is about the toast." Her voice shifted from disbelief to dismissal. "Edward, that was a joke. A bad joke, clearly, but a joke. You're overreacting. It wasn't a joke. You meant every word. And even if you didn't, the fact that you thought it was acceptable to say those things to me, in front of my family and friends and colleagues, on my 30th birthday, that tells me everything I need to know about who you are and what you think of me." She set down her coffee cup with exaggerated care. "So this is it. 2 years, and you're ending it over one poorly chosen remark." "I'm ending it over 2 years of poorly chosen remarks. I'm ending it over the credit card bills I paid while you called my taste in art unsophisticated. I'm ending it over the salary I gave you while you dismissed my achievements as luck. I'm ending it over the apartment I provided while you made clear, every day, that I was not the man you wanted, but merely the man who funded the life you did." I stood up, my voice steady. "I'm ending it because you told 60 people that I am not your future, and for once, I believe you." Chloe's face cycled through emotions. Anger, disbelief, calculation, and finally, something that looked almost like fear. "What about my job? What about it? I work for your company. You can't fire me because we broke up. That's retaliation. That's illegal. You don't work for my company anymore. I terminated your employment at 8:47 this morning. HR is processing the paperwork. You'll receive your final paycheck and a severance package equivalent to 3 months' salary, which is more generous than you deserve." I picked up a folder from my desk and extended it toward her. "This contains the details of your severance, along with the contact information for our legal department if you have any questions or concerns. I strongly recommend that you accept the package and move on." She didn't take the folder. Her face had gone white, her composure finally, fully shattered. "You can't do this. I have rights. I have connections. I will destroy you. You can try." I set the folder on the counter. "But I have 2 years of receipts, 2 years of bank statements, 2 years of documentation showing that you used my money to fund a lifestyle you couldn't afford and my position to advance a career you hadn't earned. You can try to destroy me, Chloe, but I suspect you'll find that I am no longer willing to be destroyed." I walked out of the kitchen, down the hall, to the guest room where she had slept for the past 6 months. I opened the closet, pulled out her suitcases, expensive, Italian leather, purchased with my credit card, and began to pack. She appeared in the doorway, her face a mask of fury and disbelief. "You're throwing me out. I'm asking you to leave. There's a difference. You have until the end of the week to collect your belongings and find alternative accommodation. I'll have my lawyers send over the formal notice. My name is on the lease. Your name was removed from the lease at 9:15 this morning." I continued packing, folding her cashmere sweaters with methodical precision. "I own the apartment. I pay the mortgage. Your name was added as a courtesy, and that courtesy has been revoked." She watched me for a long moment, her chest heaving with suppressed rage. Then she laughed, a short, bitter sound. "You think you've won. You think this is a victory. But you're still the same man you were yesterday. The same boring, mediocre, uninspired man who couldn't keep a girlfriend before me and won't be able to keep one after. You think money changes who you are, but it doesn't. You're still a phase. You're still someone people outgrow." I zipped the suitcase and set it by the door. You should start looking for a new apartment. The rental market in this city is competitive. She left that afternoon, her suitcases loaded into a rideshare, her expression fixed in cold contempt. She didn't say goodbye. Neither did I. The door closed behind her, and I stood alone in my apartment, finally and fully mine, and waited for the grief to hit. It didn't come. Not then, not that night, not in the days that followed. I felt not sorrow but relief, the profound release of a burden I hadn't realized I was carrying. For 2 years, I had been walking with a weight on my shoulders, and now that weight was gone, and I could stand up straight for the first time in memory. I took a week off work. I turned off my phone, ignored my email, retreated from the world to sit in the silence of my newly empty home. I walked through each room, touching surfaces, reclaiming space. I threw away her beauty products, her supplements, her collection of half-used lotions and potions. I donated her books, her decorative pillows, her artisanal candles. I scrubbed every surface, exorcising her presence from my environment with bleach and determination. And I thought about the past 2 years, the choices I had made, the person I had become, about the gradual erosion of my self-respect, the quiet accommodation of disrespect that had become my default mode of being, about the moment at the birthday dinner, when 30 people had laughed at my humiliation and I had smiled through it because I didn't know how to do anything else. I thought about Chloe's parting words, "You're still a phase. You're still someone people outgrow." And I decided, with cold, clear certainty, that she was wrong. I was not a phase. I was not someone to be outgrown, discarded, replaced. I was a man who had built an empire from nothing, who had created value where none existed, who had transformed his life through sheer force of will. I had spent 2 years believing that I needed Chloe to validate my success, and I had been catastrophically mistaken. I needed nothing from her. I needed only to remember who I was before she convinced me I was insufficient. That week of solitude became a week of reconstruction. I didn't just clean my apartment, I reimagined it. I replaced furniture, changed paint colors, created spaces that reflected my taste rather than Chloe's curated aesthetic. I bought art I actually liked, books I actually wanted to read, a sound system that played my music at volumes she would have called unrefined. I reclaimed my home, and in doing so, I reclaimed myself. I returned to work transformed. My colleagues noticed the change, my confidence, my decisiveness, my unwillingness to entertain nonsense. Marcus pulled me aside after a particularly contentious board meeting and said, "Whatever happened while you were gone, keep doing it." "I got rid of something that was poisoning me," I said, "and I'm not going to let it back in." He nodded slowly. Chloe, good." His voice was flat, final. "She was terrible for you. We all saw it, but you weren't ready to hear it." He paused. "Are you okay?" "I will be." I considered the question, testing its weight. "I think I am, actually. Or at least, I'm on my way. That's all any of us can do." He clapped me on the shoulder. "Welcome back, Edward. We missed you." The weeks became months. I threw myself into work with renewed energy, but also with a new perspective. I had spent years defining myself by my company, measuring my worth by its valuation and growth. That hadn't changed. I was still ambitious, still driven, still relentlessly focused on success. But I no longer believed that success was sufficient. I needed more than professional achievement. I needed personal connection, authentic relationship, genuine love. I began to date. Cautiously at first, then with increasing openness. I met women through friends, through work, through the ordinary accidents of social life. I was not searching for a replacement for Chloe. I was searching for someone who saw me clearly and chose me willingly, not as a transaction, but as a partnership. And then, 6 months after the birthday dinner, I met Olivia. She came to my company as a consultant, like Chloe had. But there the resemblance ended. Olivia was a partner at a prestigious architecture firm, brought in to advise on the design of our new headquarters. She was tall, athletic, with close-cropped hair and a direct gaze that made me feel simultaneously exposed and seen. She asked sharp questions, challenged my assumptions, and refused to be impressed by my net worth. "You've made some interesting choices here," she said, gesturing at the preliminary chedifon. "The glass facade is striking, but the solar gain will be problematic. Have you considered a perforated metal screen?" "I haven't," I admitted. "I'm not an architect." "No, you're a tech guy who's building a monument," to his success. Her tone was not accusatory, just factual. That's fine. But monuments need to function, not just impress. She pulled out a sketch pad and began to draw, her movements quick and confident. What if we did something like this? I watched her work, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Genuine intellectual attraction. Not to her beauty, though she was beautiful in her angular, unconventional way. To her mind, her competence, her absolute refusal to perform deference or demand validation. She was not trying to impress me or manipulate me or extract resources from me. She was simply doing her job brilliantly and expecting me to keep up. I kept up. We worked together for 3 months, designing and revising and eventually producing a plan that satisfied both of us. At the final presentation, when the board approved the design unanimously, Olivia turned to me and said, "Not bad, tech guy. Not bad, architect." She smiled, and something shifted between us, a recognition, a possibility, the first thread of connection. I asked her to dinner. She said yes. Our first date lasted 4 hours. We talked about architecture and technology, art and literature, our families and our histories, and our hopes for the future. I learned that she had grown up in a small town in Oregon, the daughter of a carpenter and a teacher, and had worked her way through architecture school with scholarships and student loans. I learned that she had been married briefly, in her 20s, to a man who couldn't handle her ambition. I learned that she ran marathons, spoke passable Mandarin, and had a weakness for bad reality television. She learned that I had started my company at 24, that my parents still lived in the house where I grew up, that I had spent 2 years with a woman who treated me like an ATM and a stepping stone. I told her about the birthday dinner, the toast, the systematic dismantling of my relationship and my illusions. I told her about the week of solitude and reconstruction, the slow process of remembering who I was. That took courage, she said. It took self-preservation. There's a difference. Sometimes they're the same thing. She studied me across the table, her gaze thoughtful. You're not what I expected. What did you expect? The tech guy? The founder? The self-made millionaire with a savior complex and a desperate need for validation? She smiled, softening the assessment. You're not that. You're someone who made a mistake, learned from it, and changed. That's rare. I didn't know what to say. I wasn't accustomed to being seen so clearly, assessed so accurately. With Chloe, I had been a resource to be managed, a provider to be exploited. With Olivia, I was simply a person, with strengths and weaknesses and the ordinary complexity of human existence. Thank you, I said. I think. You're welcome. She raised her glass. To learning from mistakes. To learning from mistakes. We drank, and the evening continued, and I felt something I hadn't felt in years. Hope. Our relationship developed slowly, deliberately, both of us cautious after our respective failures. We didn't rush into cohabitation or financial entanglement. We didn't merge our lives or our identities. We simply spent time together, learning each other's rhythms and preferences and quirks. We discovered that we both hated mushrooms, loved hiking, and could argue about abstract concepts for hours without rancor. We discovered that our differences complemented rather than conflicted. I was structured. She was spontaneous. I was analytical. She was intuitive. I worried about the future. She lived in the present. We also discovered, gradually and surprisingly, that Chloe had been a presence in Olivia's life long before I entered either of their orbits. They had met in graduate school, at a prestigious business and design program that admitted only 50 students per year. Olivia was there for architecture, Chloe for marketing. They were assigned to the same project team and clashed immediately over creative direction. Olivia had the stronger portfolio. Chloe had the stronger network. Olivia won the argument. Chloe won the professor's favor. The project was completed, grades were assigned, and the two women went their separate ways, but not without lasting animosity. Chloe, I learned, had spent years trying to surpass Olivia professionally. She applied to the same firms, pursued the same clients, cultivated the same connections. She never quite succeeded. Olivia was simply better, more talented, more respected, more genuinely accomplished. Chloe's resentment festered, a wound that no amount of external validation could heal. When Olivia told me this, I was stunned. She never mentioned you. She wouldn't have. Olivia shrugged, unconcerned. I'm not important to her story. I'm just the benchmark she can't quite reach. She paused, considering. Or maybe I was. Until you. Me. You were her achievement. Her prize. The successful founder she had captured, the resource she had secured. And then you left her, and she lost not just you, but the validation you represented. Her expression was neutral, but her voice carried an undercurrent of satisfaction. And now you're with me. The woman she spent 4 years failing to surpass. I can't imagine how that must feel. I couldn't either. But I was about to find out. Our engagement was not a dramatic production. There was no flash mob, no destination proposal, no elaborate choreography. Just a quiet evening at home, a simple ring, and a question asked with genuine vulnerability. Olivia. I knelt on the floor of our living room. We had moved in together 6 months earlier, cautiously and deliberately, and held out the ring. I spent 30 years searching for someone who sees me clearly and chooses me freely. I didn't know that was what I was searching for, but it was. And then I found you. I paused, my heart pounding. I don't want to be a phase in your life. I want to be the whole story. Will you marry me? She looked at the ring, then at me, and her eyes filled with tears. You ridiculous man. Her voice was thick. Of course I'll marry you. I slid the ring onto her finger, and she pulled me up and kissed me, and we stood together in our imperfect, beautiful home, holding each other in the future we had chosen to build. We announced our engagement 2 weeks later, with a photograph taken by a friend who was a professional photographer. The image was simple. Olivia and I standing in front of the completed headquarters building, her hand on my chest, my arm around her waist, both of us smiling with genuine, unguarded joy. The ring was visible, catching the light. The building behind us was a monument to my success, but the photograph was not about success. It was about connection, commitment, the quiet triumph of 2 people who had found each other after years of searching. I posted the photograph on my social media accounts with a simple caption. She said yes. The best decision I ever made was waiting for the right person. The response was immediate and overwhelming. Hundreds of likes, dozens of comments, a cascade of congratulations from friends and colleagues and acquaintances. I responded to as many as I could, grateful for the outpouring of support. And then, late that evening, I received a notification that Chloe Chun had viewed the photograph. I stared at the notification for a long time. I imagined her scrolling through her feed, pausing on the image, recognizing Olivia's face. I imagined her processing the implications, that I had not only moved on, but moved on to the woman she had spent years trying to surpass. I imagined the rage, the humiliation, the bitter taste of consequences she had never anticipated. I felt nothing. No satisfaction, no revenge, no triumphant closure. Just the quiet acknowledgement that her opinion no longer mattered to me. She had dismissed me as a phase, and she had been right, but not in the way she intended. I was a phase in her life, a chapter she had closed, a lesson she had failed to learn. And now she was reading about my happiness in the woman she envied most, and there was nothing she could do about it. I closed the notification and turned off my phone. Olivia was reading in bed, her glasses perched on her nose, her engagement ring catching the lamplight. I climbed in beside her, and she shifted to make room without looking up from her book. Everything okay? She asked. Everything is perfect. I kissed her temple and settled into the warmth of her presence. Go back to your book. She smiled and returned to her reading. I closed my eyes and listened to the quiet rhythm of her breathing, the rustle of pages, the distant sounds of the city outside our window. I thought about the journey that had brought me here, the years of struggle and sacrifice, the 2 years of accommodation and denial, the moment of public humiliation that had finally broken my paralysis. I thought about Chloe, somewhere in the same city, alone with her resentment and her regrets. I thought about Olivia, beside me, chosen and choosing. I thought about the word phase and how its meaning had shifted. A phase is not nothing. It is a stage of development, a necessary transition, a prerequisite for growth. My relationship with Chloe had been a phase, not because I was insufficient, but because she was. I had needed to experience her contempt to recognize my worth. I had needed to be discarded to discover my value. I had needed to be called a phase to become someone who could never be outgrown. That was the gift she had given me, though she would never understand it. By dismissing me, she had freed me. By humiliating me, she had strengthened me. By declaring that I was not her future, she had opened the door to mine. I didn't thank her. I didn't forgive her. I simply released her, finally and fully, from any claim on my attention or emotion. She was no longer a presence in my life, not even as a wound or a grievance. She was just a person I had once known, a chapter one had closed, a phase I had outgrown. And Olivia? Olivia was not a phase. Olivia was my present, my future, my whole story. Olivia was the woman who saw me clearly and chose me freely, not despite my flaws, but including them. Olivia was the partner who challenged and supported and loved me, without condition or transaction. Olivia was the reason I had waited, the reason I had healed, the reason I had become someone capable of genuine connection. I opened my eyes and watched her read, her brow furrowed in concentration, her lips moving slightly as she processed each sentence. I thought about all the moments that had led to this one, the birthday dinner, the silent wish, the systematic dismantling of my old life. I thought about the week of solitude, the reconstruction of my home and myself. I thought about the first time I saw Olivia, drawing on her sketchpad, completely unimpressed by my success. I thought about the photograph that had traveled across the internet, carrying news of my happiness to a woman who had once been certain I would never find any. I thought about her viewing it, alone in her apartment, her expensive furniture and designer clothes no compensation for the emptiness of her life. I thought about the envy she must have felt, the rage, the bitter recognition that she had not merely lost me, but lost me to her nemesis. And I thought, with no satisfaction but simple clarity, she did this to herself. Because she had. Every choice, every cruelty, every casual dismissal, they had accumulated into consequences she had never anticipated. She had treated me as disposable, and I had proved her wrong. She had declared that I was not her future, and I had become someone else's. She had laughed at my humiliation, and now the world was laughing at hers. But I was not laughing. I was not celebrating. I was simply living my life, with the woman I loved, in the home we had built together. Chloe was no longer relevant to that life, except as a reminder of how far I had come. She was a shadow, fading in the light of my happiness. Olivia finished her chapter and set aside her book. She removed her glasses, stretched, and turned to face me. You're staring. I'm admiring. Same thing. She smiled, that crooked, unguarded smile that I had fallen in love with. What are you thinking about? I considered the question. I could tell her about Chloe, the notification, the complicated history that connected us. I could confess my moment of distraction, my brief detour into the past. But that was not what I was thinking about. Not really. I'm thinking about how glad I am that you said yes, I said. I'm thinking about our wedding, and our future, and all the ordinary days in between. I'm thinking about how strange it is that happiness can be so quiet. She reached out and took my hand, her fingers interlacing with mine. Quiet is good. Quiet is real. Drama is just noise. Chloe was noise. Yes, she was. Her voice was gentle, non-judgmental. But you turned down the volume. I squeezed her hand. With your help. A little. She smiled. Mostly your own. We lay together in the darkness, listening to the quiet hum of our shared life. Outside, the city continued its endless motion. Inside, we were still, anchored in each other's presence. I thought about the wedding we were planning, the family we might create, the decades of ordinary days that stretched before us. I thought about the challenges we would face, the arguments we would have, the moments of doubt and difficulty that inevitably accompanied any genuine partnership. I thought about the work of love, the daily discipline of showing up and choosing each other, not once but countless times. I was ready for it. Not because I was perfect, not because I had all the answers, but because I had finally learned the most important lesson of my life, that my worth was not determined by someone else's assessment, that I could survive rejection, abandonment, public humiliation, that I could rebuild myself from rubble and emerge stronger than before, that I was not a phase to be outgrown but a person to be chosen, and I deserved someone who would choose me freely, completely, without reservation. Olivia chose me. Every day, in small ways and large, she chose me. And I chose her, with the same clarity and commitment. We were not a transaction or a convenience or a stepping stone. We were partners, equals, two people who had found in each other the reflection of their own best selves. That was the ending I had wished for, blowing out 30 candles in a room full of strangers who didn't understand what they were witnessing. That was the future I had claimed, in the silence of my own determination. That was the life I had built, brick by brick, from the wreckage of my illusions. And Chloe? Chloe was somewhere in the same city, living her own life, making her own choices, facing her own consequences. I didn't wish her ill. I didn't wish her well. I simply didn't wish for her at all. She had been a phase, and I had outgrown her. Our wedding was held on a June afternoon, in a garden filled with roses and the people we loved most. Olivia wore a dress of ivory silk, her grandmother's pearls at her throat, flowers woven into her short hair. I wore a gray suit, a white rose in my lapel, my grandmother's watch on my wrist. Our family sat in white chairs, arranged in neat rows on the grass. Our friends stood beside us, supporting us with their presence and their love. The officiant spoke of commitment and partnership, the courage required to build a life together, the beauty of two people choosing each other day after day. We exchanged vows we had written ourselves, promises that reflected not fantasy, but hard-won wisdom. I promise to see you clearly, Olivia said, her voice steady, her gaze unwavering. Not as I wish you to be, not as I fear you might become, but as you actually are. And I promise to love that person, completely and without reservation, for as long as we both shall live. I promise to never treat you as a phase, I said, and heard the ripple of soft laughter through the audience. I promise to recognize that you are not a stepping stone or a transaction or a convenience. You are my partner, my equal, my home. And I promise to spend the rest of my life earning the privilege of being yours. We exchanged rings, kissed, and walked back down the aisle together, hand in hand, into the future we had chosen. The reception was a celebration of our community, the network of friends and family who had supported us through our individual struggles and collective healing. My mother danced with Olivia's father. Marcus gave a toast that was equal parts hilarious and heartfelt. Olivia's college roommate flew in from Tokyo and cried through the entire best man speech. I stood at the edge of the dance floor, watching my wife spin in the arms of her uncle, and felt a profound, bone-deep contentment. This was not the life I had planned, not the future I had imagined. It was better. It was real. My phone buzzed in my pocket. I ignored it, then buzzed again. I pulled it out, intending to silence it, and saw a notification from an unknown number. I saw your wedding photos. You look happy. I hope you know what you have. See. I stared at the message for a long moment. Chloe had found a way to contact me, despite the blocks and the distance and the 2 years of silence. She had seen the photographs, read the announcements, learned that I had married the woman she envied most. And she had reached out, with words that could be interpreted as genuine or self-serving, depending on my willingness to believe in her capacity for change. I didn't respond. I didn't block the number. That felt unnecessary, almost petty. I simply deleted the message and returned my phone to my pocket. Olivia was walking toward me, her face flushed from dancing, her smile radiant. Who was that? Nobody. I took her hand and pulled her onto the dance floor. Just noise. She laughed and wrapped her arms around my neck. Then turned down the volume. I already did. I pulled her close, breathing in the scent of her perfume, the warmth of her skin. You're the only music I need. We swayed together, surrounded by the people we loved, the evidence of our commitment, the promise of our future. I thought about Chloe, alone somewhere, reading about my happiness and finding it insufficient consolation for her own choices. I thought about the birthday dinner, the 30 candles, the silent wish I had made with smoke on my tongue. I thought about the long, winding road that had brought me here, to this garden, to this woman, to this life. And I thought about the word phase, and how its meaning had transformed. Chloe had called me a phase, and she had been right, not because I was insufficient, but because she was. I was a phase in her life, a chapter she had closed, a lesson she had failed to learn. But she was a phase in mine as well, a necessary transition, a catalyst for growth. I had needed to experience her contempt to recognize my worth. I had needed to be discarded to discover my value. I had needed to be called a phase to become someone who could never be outgrown. The song ended. Another began. Olivia rested her head on my shoulder, and we continued to dance, two people moving together in the rhythm of their shared life. Outside, the sun was setting, painting the sky in shades of gold and rose. Inside, the celebration continued, laughter and music and the clinking of glasses. I was 32 years old. I was married to the woman I loved. I had built a successful company, a meaningful career, a life of purpose and connection. I had survived humiliation and rejection and the slow erosion of my self-respect. I had learned to recognize my own worth, independent of anyone else's assessment. I had outgrown the people who had tried to diminish me and found the ones who saw me clearly. And I was happy, not the guarded, provisional happiness of my years with Chloe, always contingent on her approval and satisfaction. A deeper, steadier happiness, rooted in my own sense of worth and my confidence in the life I had built. A happiness that asked nothing from anyone except the opportunity to continue. Olivia lifted her head and looked at me, her eyes bright with joy and champagne. "What are you thinking about?" I smiled. "I'm thinking about how glad I am that you said yes." She kissed me, soft and certain. "Me too." We danced until the band stopped playing, until the guests began to depart, until the garden was empty except for us and the stars and the fading scent of roses. We collected our belongings, thanked our families, walked hand in hand to the car that would carry us to our first night as a married couple. I drove. Olivia leaned against the window, her eyes half closed, her engagement ring catching the light of passing street lamps. The city streamed past us, anonymous and indifferent, billions of lives intersecting in patterns too complex to comprehend. Somewhere in that vast network, Chloe was living her own life, making her own choices, facing her own consequences. She was a stranger to me now, a face I had once loved, a voice I had once trusted, a presence that had once defined my days. But that was before the birthday dinner, before the toast, before the silent wish that had transformed my life. Before I learned that being called a phase was not a condemnation, but a liberation. Before I discovered that the woman I was meant to love had been waiting for me all along, not at the end of my journey, but integrated into its every step. I pulled into our driveway, turned off the engine, and sat for a moment in the quiet dark. Olivia stirred beside me. "We're home," she said. "Yes." I looked at our house, the lights we had left on, the life waiting for us inside. "We are." We carried each other over the threshold, metaphorically, since Olivia insisted that lifting her would strain my back, and began our marriage in the ordinary intimacy of brushing teeth and changing clothes and settling into bed. We talked about the wedding, the guests, the moments of joy and awkwardness and unexpected grace. We laughed about Marcus's speech, my mother's enthusiastic dancing, Olivia's uncle's ill-advised magic tricks. We held each other in the darkness and whispered hopes and fears and the quiet promises that sustained us. And eventually, we slept. I woke once, in the small hours of morning, and lay still in the familiar comfort of our bed. Olivia breathed softly beside me, her hand resting on my chest, her body curved against mine. The room was quiet, the house settled, the city distant and muted. I thought about the wish I had made, 30 candles flickering in front of me, the taste of smoke on my tongue. I had wished for the strength to leave Chloe. I had wished for the clarity to see myself as I truly was. I had wished for a future that did not include her face at my table, her voice in my ear, her hand in my wallet. I had wished, without knowing it, for this. For Olivia, and our home, and the quiet contentment of a life built on genuine connection. For the peace that comes from knowing, with absolute certainty, that I was exactly where I was meant to be. I closed my eyes and returned to sleep, secure in the warmth of my wife's embrace, the solidity of our shared life, the certainty of our future together. The next time I thought about Chloe was months later, when a mutual acquaintance mentioned in passing that she had left the country. A new job, a new city, a new continent. A fresh start, perhaps, or another attempt to outrun the consequences of her choices. I listened without comment, filed the information away, and returned to my conversation with Olivia about weekend plans and grocery lists. She was gone. Not from my memory. I would always remember her, the lessons she taught me, the pain she caused, the growth she inadvertently catalyzed. But from my present, my future, my ongoing story. She was a character in my past, a phase I had outgrown, a chapter one had closed and would not revisit. And Olivia? Olivia was my present, my future, my whole story. Olivia was the woman who saw me clearly and chose me freely, not despite my flaws, but including them. Olivia was the partner who challenged and supported and loved me, without condition or transaction. Olivia was the reason I had waited, the reason I had healed, the reason I had become someone capable of genuine connection. We are still together, Olivia and I. We have been married for 3 years now, and every day I am grateful for her presence in my life. We have our challenges, our disagreements, our moments of frustration and misunderstanding. But we also have our foundation, the mutual respect, the genuine affection, the commitment to choosing each other day after day. We are not perfect, but we are perfect for each other. Our company continues to thrive. Canvas, the platform my brother Daniel and I built, has become an industry standard, used by millions of creators worldwide. I have stepped back from day-to-day operations, focusing on strategy and mentorship, and I have found that I enjoy this phase of my career more than I expected. Building is satisfying, but nurturing is its own reward. Olivia's architecture firm has grown as well. She was made partner last year, and her designs have won international recognition. We collaborate occasionally, when our projects intersect, and I am continually awed by her creativity and precision. She is, quite simply, brilliant, and she is mine, and I am hers, and we are building a legacy together that neither of us could have achieved alone. We are also building a family. Our daughter, Elena, was born 8 months ago, and she has transformed our lives in ways we never anticipated. She has her mother's eyes and, apparently, her father's stubbornness. She sleeps poorly, eats enthusiastically, and regards the world with skeptical curiosity. She is the best thing we have ever created. I think about Chloe sometimes, usually late at night when I am feeding Elena and the world is quiet. I wonder if she ever found what she was searching for, the validation, the success, the sense of completion that she believed would come from external achievement. I hope she did. I hope she learned the lesson that eluded her for so long, that worth is not conferred by others but cultivated within. I hope she is happy, or at least at peace. But I don't wonder enough to investigate. Her story is no longer mine to follow. My attention belongs to my wife, my daughter, my work, my life. Everything I need is here, in this house, in these arms, in the ordinary miracle of each passing day. And when I think about the birthday dinner, the toast, the laughter that filled the Venetian room, I no longer feel pain or shame or regret. I feel gratitude, not for Chloe, not for her cruelty, but for the person I became in its aftermath. I needed to be broken to be rebuilt. I needed to be discarded to discover my worth. I needed to be called a phase to become someone who could never be outgrown. That is the gift she gave me, though she would never understand it. That is the transformation I underwent, the evolution I achieved, the person I became. That is the story I carry with me, not as a wound, but as a testament to my own resilience. And it is a story I will tell my daughter, someday, when she is old enough to understand. Not as a lesson in revenge or bitterness, but as a lesson in self-respect. Not everyone who claims to love you actually does. Not everyone who dismisses your worth is correct in their assessment. Not every ending is a failure. Sometimes, it is the beginning of everything. Elena stirs in my arms, her small face scrunching in the prelude to wakefulness. I adjust her blanket, murmur soothing nonsense, watch her settle back into sleep. Her fingers curl around mine, instinctively seeking connection, and I feel the weight of my responsibility to her, not just to provide and protect, but to model the kind of person I hope she will become. I want her to know that her worth is inherent, not contingent. I want her to recognize manipulation and resist it. I want her to choose partners who see her clearly and choose her freely, not as a transaction or convenience, but as a genuine commitment. I want her to have the courage to leave situations that diminish her and the wisdom to recognize when she has found something worth staying for. I want her to learn from my mistakes, my struggles, my eventual triumph. I want her to understand that being called a phase is not a condemnation, but a liberation. I want her to know that she is not someone to be outgrown. She is someone to be chosen, cherished, and celebrated. But those are lessons for another day. For now, she sleeps, and I hold her, and the world is quiet and full of grace. Olivia appears in the doorway, her hair disheveled, her eyes soft with sleep. Is she okay? She's perfect. I smile at my wife, this woman who has transformed my life in ways I never anticipated. Go back to bed. I've got her. She crosses the room and kisses Elena's forehead, then mine. Don't stay up too late. I won't. She returns to bed, and I sit alone in the quiet dark, holding my daughter and the accumulated weight of my history. I think about the birthday dinner, the 30 candles, the silent wish that set me free. I think about Chloe, somewhere in the world, living her own life and making her own choices. I think about Olivia, sleeping in our bed, her hand resting on the empty space where I should be. I think about the word phase and how its meaning has shifted over time. A phase is not nothing. It is a stage of development, a necessary transition, a prerequisite for growth. Chloe was a phase. My marriage to her was a phase. The pain and humiliation and gradual reconstruction were all phases. They were necessary, each one, to bring me here, to this moment, to this child, to this life. And now I am in a new phase: fatherhood, partnership, the quiet contentment of a life fully lived. It is not the final phase. There will be others, as yet unknown, awaiting me in the future. But it is the phase I have chosen, the phase I have earned, the phase I will inhabit with gratitude and purpose. I look down at Elena, her face peaceful in sleep, her future unwritten. I think about the person she will become, the challenges she will face, the choices she will make. I think about the love I will give her, the lessons I will teach her, the example I will set. I think about the phase of my life that is ending and the phase that is beginning, and I am not afraid. Because I have learned that phases are not endings. They are transformations. They are the process by which we become who we are meant to be. They are the story of our lives, written in chapters we cannot predict but can, with courage and resilience, learn to embrace. And my story, which began with a boy who believed his worth was contingent on external validation, continues with a man who knows, with absolute certainty, that he is enough. Not because someone told him so, but because he proved it to himself. That is the gift I will give my daughter. Not the absence of struggle, but the confidence that she can survive it. Not the promise of easy happiness, but the knowledge that she is capable of building her own. Not the fantasy of a perfect life, but the reality of a meaningful one. That is the legacy of being called a phase. That is the redemption I have earned. That is the story I will tell, again and again, until it becomes not just my truth, but hers. And it begins here, in the quiet dark, with a sleeping child, and a loving wife, and a man who finally, fully, knows himself. Have you ever been told you're just a phase? How did you prove them wrong? Like, share, and subscribe for more stories of redemption, resilience, and finding the love you truly deserve.